We are here today speaking about Comics Lit Volume 1. Yes, more volumes are coming. Anyone who's on the video version will be able to see it in the background of my video. You can see Comics Lit nice and big. And then in Tonya's, it's sort of medium. And then in Tony's, it's nice and diddly. So the trifecta of Comics Lit with the two authors / organisers / editors of Comics Lit. I'm here with T&T. Tony with an A at the end that makes Tonya. You know, you can't get more interconnected than you guys, both in name, in writing ability, and just in busyness as well.
Love for the Beastie Boys.
I know, and your thirst for books as well. So I've got. It will be more of a free for all. Yeah. There's no essays about that. But there's a couple of sort of question things I've got, but generally just be go buy Comics Lit, guys. If you've never read a comic, it will convince you to get some. I would say it's a great introduction if you've never read comics and a starting point of some great comics to pick up. If you're a veteran, then it will tick all those boxes. And if you're someone who's kind of a moderate or maybe hasn't read comics for a while, it will reinvigorate your love for comics. Now, I know the story about, 5-ish years ago, Tony kind of had this idea, but it fell through and then it came back. Ooh. So, Tony,
yes.
Why don't you tell us about your idea and how you and Tonya kind of came together in this collaboration, and then we'll just kind of go from there.
Sure. So I've actually had the idea for like 30 years. The idea.
Okay.
So I had a professor in college called Adam Lutzker, and it was an interdisciplinary studies course, and I wanted to do this. And he was like, yeah, that's interesting. Go ahead, and try to compare things. Actually, the main subject for Tonya's and my performance piece for Volume 2 actually stemmed from that class. So the argument was, as a comics nerd, that it's real art, and this whole idea of it's like trash and whatever. And of course, it was always a disposable medium. It was made on print paper that was meant to be thrown away, all that stuff. That's part of why those old comics are so valuable, because if anybody kept around Amazing Fantasy 15 or Action Comics 1 or Detective 27, you had something special because they were literally handed around. I mean, I've said this out loud. When I was in middle school, somehow I had in my hands the Turtles, the original New Hampshire Comic-Con Turtle.
The black and white ones.
Yeah.
Wow.
I have no idea. Somehow they passed through my hands. Somebody in my crap little town had a copy of those. I genuinely don't have a clue. But that's how I read the original Turtles, the original, like that 5,000 print run or whatever. That's insane. Like whoever had that has got to be so mad. So we could retire. So anyway, but my whole thing is this is real art. This is real literature. Like I felt so connected. I felt seen as a kid reading comics, reading Titans, like reading X-Men, all those things. And so it's just something I wanted to do. And so, like I said, about 5 years ago, I gathered a team of nerds. Tonya was one of them. And I said, here's the idea. We're going to compare literature to comic books, and that was going to be it. It was going to be that. It was going to be like my essay, which is about Rappaccini's daughter and Poison Ivy, and it was going to be just that. So I gathered the team. It was Tonya, Seth, Jack. I had some other people from Fantastic Universes, some people from the Watching Comics pod. We were ready to go, and then things just kind of fell apart. And then that was it. And I felt bad because the person that I was partnering with was going to push the publishing side of it. And then that fell through and I felt bad. So it just sat there. Cut to our very good friend somewhere, somewhen. This will be your part to pick up the story, my friend.
So I was asked to do an online literary conference. And in this conference, Four Horsemen Publications, they were there doing their own talk. And I stayed on because why would I not want to listen to these, this female-led publishing house that are making things happen in the world, So I'm there, I'm listening. And this was done by the And I Thought ladies, which, they're responsible for me even knowing who you guys are because they introduced me to Bruce, who introduced me to Mike, who introduced me to Tony. So in a roundabout sense, Mike connected us, but the And I Thought ladies, again, are responsible for Comics Lit all the way
That's
through.
That's amazing.
So, they're the hosts, and their talk, the Four Horsemen ladies, their talk was so thorough that the audience sat there blinking like, wow, they have covered everything. They have gone through every possible question, and there were no questions. And so the anti-thought ladies are like, we know Tonya has a question. And I was like, okay, well, I know this person who has this, this pitch that he wants to make about comic books essentially being classic literature works that are reincarnated, and that there's a value in comic books that goes beyond what most people think. And as I just off the top of my head told them about it, they were reaching into the screen going, give it to me, give it to me. And so I contacted Tony and was like, hey, I didn't mean to pitch your baby, but I pitched your baby and they want it. So we need to move.
So was this before Tony's book deal with the Austen Chronicles, or did they just seemingly exist at the same time and just kind of separately converge simultaneously?
It's how I heard of the company.
Right.
Was through that. So I heard about the company. So Tonya explains it to me. So I'm searching around their website, and then she's like, oh, they've got a fiction side, but they only really want a series. And at the time, Welcome to Mansfield wasn't a series. It was a standalone. And so then it was just looking that over and thinking that through and just having the conversation with Lee. I'm like, well, I've sort of created a series because all of the characters exist in a shared universe. So I could totally make it a series. So then I pitched it to them. Oh, look at that. Welcome to Mansfield. So then I pitched it to them. They picked that up because in the meantime, we were in the background trying to get everybody back on board because Faye dropped out and didn't want to do it. The Watching Comics guys dropped out. So we went from having like 9 or 10 people who were willing to write essays. We were down to like 5 or 6. Yumi, Eric, Kelly, Seth, and Heath, I guess. So those were the 6. And so then we had to find other people. So I got the book deal for the Austen Chronicles. This was all happening simultaneously. And then when we were ready, did we have to go back through the pitch process for them and submit it through the portal, or were we just good to go at that point?
I mean, it was pre-approved, but they said it goes to the right places if we put it through that.
That's right. Okay.
So we did have to, and it also helps with the back end of things because we already have the blurbs taken care of. We already have everybody's bios and all of that. Just having it together and having that pitch was what made it much easier for Bryan to write that forward, because and really just for me to ask him to do it. Here's the pitch to help you understand what we're doing. And that's what got him on board, is that pitch. So it was good that we did that.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, Bryan Edward Hill is a comic writing hero of mine. He's a genius, and he does more than just comics. He does movies. He's a writer, director, man about town, one of the nicest human beings in the world too. Like he's one of the people who makes you not despise social media.
And he's humble.
He's such a great guy. Yeah. And his foreword is just boss.
Right. It moved me to tears. It was like, wow, this is beautiful. And it's not even one of the essays. It was so well done.
Yeah. And he just got the assignment. And
yeah.
And we appreciate him, Bryan Edward Hill, King. I did interview years ago. I interviewed Gleb when they were working on Angel together. And he said the same thing. It's like, because he was drawing Angel, and he's like, Bryan's so great. Because one of the things Bryan does as a writer, if you read his comics, is there's space. He writes pages and panels for the artist. So he writes it and he tells you what he wants, but then there's no dialogue there. He's like, you shine. And like, that's hard, as the writer, you're like the Chris Claremont school of, I want all the words.
Well, I was going to say, just quick to tuck in, is because of you, Tony, I watched Before Sunrise. And in that very iconic line is with I can't remember either of the characters' names.
Jesse and Celine.
Celine, there you go. Of course, because French name. So Celine says her opinion is that God is the space between, and God is really not a human form. It's the space between people when people are trying to understand each other, and kind of the love between humans and that. So that's just what made me think of that when you said Bryan Edward Hill is great at the space. And then I think of Tony, space, and I weirdly don't make a Star Wars reference. I think the space in between of understanding is what someone's opinion of God is, and that is in one of Tony's favorite movies. So,
yeah,
and it is a beautiful movie. It is beautiful.
Megan did not like it at all.
She said that afterthoughts. I'm going to come in hot. I guess.
I don't even know if we're going to do an afterthoughts on it, to be blunt. Yeah, I know. She said it's too normal. And you know what Megan's like with weirdness? I was like, I thought this was perfect for you. It's a pseudo rom-com talky. It's grounded. It's in Vienna. Like, this seems like the perfect film. She said, no, it's just boring and nothing happens. I'm like, but And she's like, yeah, it's just too normal. And I'm like, but your whole problem with every film I show you is they're too weird. And I show you like the film I thought was going to be a home run. She's like, nah, it's too normal. I don't like it. I'm like, I love you. You're my wife, but I don't understand you sometimes.
I love you too, Megan. It's okay. We all don't have to like the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, she is. So getting Bryan, I'm glad that the pitch worked, because Bryan Edward Hill is a like you said, he's such a great writer. And again, just to tie that back to what you said though, Mike, is his foreword is about superheroes bridging a language barrier. But he was on set, and it didn't matter, like the Superman logo having that universal appeal, and that just nails what our whole premise is. And what I appreciate most about Tonya being part of this and being the co-editor, and we'll talk about that process, but is that her ability to convince me, and it was a short walk, but it just made me feel good, because sometimes you get in your own head when you're working alone on things, is that it's okay, because I'm like, well, her argument is the essays themselves are literature. And so like Alyson's very personal essay and Heath's very personal essay and Tonya's, which became a very personal essay as she was writing it, very first person-y, that is literature too. So we call it comics lit in that comic books are high art, but these essays are part of the conversation. What Tonya kept saying to me in the process is these essays are high art. It's not just that Tony Holt killed it. It's not that you guys have no idea what was cut out of Kelly Gaines' essay. Kelly Gaines could have just written a book on her essay. It's absurd. She's such a good writer. And it's like, you don't know what isn't there. And so, but so for me, that's the most important thing. So as we envision the future volumes, what we can do and how we can do it changes. And if Tonya weren't my partner on this, it would still have been not rigid. It still would have been a lot more. It would still have been fun. I'd still be proud of it, but it wouldn't be the collection it is without her sense to say, no, what we're doing is literature. And so these things also count. So I appreciate you, friend and sister, for doing that, because I wouldn't have thought to do it.
But art, it creates on its own. We had to go with the muse on this. And hey, we're not going to sit there and tell people, no, I understand that you're being moved to write about this thing and it's adjacent to this. It doesn't count because it doesn't make a one-on-one comparison between two characters. It's, you sat down to do that and this is what came out.
Yeah.
I sat down to write about the Hulk and I didn't mention him at all.
You mentioned, you mentioned Catwoman and Irene Adler, and Irene Adler is one of my all-time biggest crushes from my favorite series of all time, Sherlock. But people think it's a Star Wars series. They're wrong. BBC Sherlock is my favorite TV series of all time.
It's brilliant.
It is. And Irene Adler, the woman, when I watched that, I had a weird awakening, and I was like, I wasn't like that young or anything. I was like, something in me has changed after seeing this person.
And see, that's what Catwoman does.
Yeah, I've never had an affinity for Catwoman, but I've never read any Catwoman comics, so that might be why. On screen, I'm always like, but, everyone's personal choice. But Irene Adler, I was like, I never made that connection, but I was like, Irene Adler's
but that's the most Catwoman-like version of her.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? Especially when you were making the comparison, I was like, and all I thought of was Irene Adler with the whip, and I was like,
right, with the riding crop.
And then obviously we won't spoil the essay yet, but so many comparisons of just like, even the name of the Sherlock episode she's in, referencing a Catwoman comic, or a comic that Catwoman's in. I'm like, I told Megan that, she was like, oh my God. Like even Megan was like quite surprised and blown away by that when she has no stake in the game.
All of these different elements, they made her bisexual. She's a dominatrix. Like, I'm sure that was, none of those things were an accident.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I want to ask, because we will talk a little bit, I don't want to talk in depth about all the essays because we will be here all evening, and we want people to pick up the book and experience them. But if we haven't spoken about all of them at the end, I'll reel them off. But I did want to ask sort of what made you guys sort of decide the order of the books? Because you mentioned it at the start and we mentioned it off air. Everyone's essay is phenomenal in different ways. I think that I enjoyed some more than others. I won't say which ones because that would be mean. However, I think it's undeniable one of the top ones is Tony Holt's at the end. And that was so good. I spent about an hour researching and looking into stuff that he inspired me. I was like, what's this? What's a Jim Crow law? Because obviously I'm English, so we don't know a lot of the intricacies. Then I started looking into like the slave trade and when America, the Emancipation Proclamation. I always think of South Park when I hear that. I'm not a fan of hip hop. Whenever I hear that in the 13th Amendment, I was like, oh, I didn't realize it was actually an amendment. Then I looked at like when the UK banned slavery, because I know we did it earlier than the US, but then there's caveats. So just his essay about that really made me just look really far in. So I thought that essay as an ending was a really powerful one, especially because of all the things it says about, race, and obviously The Invisible Man, which links to Tonya Todd's banned book conversations, which I realized I hadn't listened to that episode. It must have slipped through the net. So I was listening to that after, and I was like, oh my God. So now I've got Invisible Man as one of my next things on Audible to listen to
so
as well.
Good.
So and that's just one little story. All these essays inspired me in different ways, but that one in particular, I read that and I was like how Spider-Dan spoke about being changed by Invisible Man, I was genuinely changed by that essay, like hugely. So I just want to ask, not just that essay was amazing because it was, but did you specifically go, that one has to go at the end? How did you guys figure that out? I'm just interested by the process.
We definitely knew that when we read them all. We're like, this is the closer. And
we both made our list, remember? We're like,
did,
okay,
yes.
Without talking to each other, let's just put them in the order we think they should go. And there was just a slight variation. They were almost exactly the same, except for flipping two. And I made the argument for why that should be where it was.
Yeah, and I agreed, and it made perfect sense with what she was saying, because they're so different, and we were trying to like find where's the break, where's the line, and then when
like an album,
it was like an album, and the best part is that then when we get Bryan's amazing foreword, already having decided that Tony's goes last. That was like, oh, wow, that is like the infinity loop right there. You just can kind of go back and start right over. Our own little Finian's Wake. I would say that Ada's was the one that we needed to find the right home for because it's so different. And we actually had to remind the editors, leave this alone. The format is broken on this, and that is part of the poetic nature of, and anybody who's ever heard Ada read a poem, reading her essay, it's like talking to her, and it's also like watching her read. I've been in the room with her when she reads poetry. You have too, right?
Yes.
Right, Tonya?
Well, I had on my podcast as well with her poem thing, so I'll put a link to that as well.
Yeah, it's like she transcends, like she floats when she reads. It's like this amazing experience. So we knew that one was the tricky one, and once we figured out where that went, then everything was easy to be on the other side of Ada's.
And that was the one that we had a difference of opinion on. It's like, this needs to be right in the middle because it is, this is where we need to turn the page and start moving, blending the literary and the comic book aspect of it. And hers encompasses, the value of teaching it to students in college.
Yeah.
Very insightful.
It was so good. And I'm really glad she did that. I'm really glad she wrote about that experience. I'm really glad I hired her to teach that class. Everything came together really well.
Right. So, and that's not what she sat down to write. Remember, she was going to make a very specific comparison. But when she started writing, she was moved to tell this. And it's like, and there's a reason for that. It needs to be shared. Yeah.
Yeah. And because she was going to just do the straight up, Romeo and Juliet saga, which is pretty obvious. If anybody's read Saga, that's pretty obvious. But when you start to think about Saga, and then we did the Indie Comic Spotlight version of Saga, and we talked more about it, and then she started thinking about it more, and then she started teaching it. And so it just changed everything for her. And the same with Heath. He sat down to just do the straight comparison of V for Vendetta and Phantom of the Opera.
He mentions it in the essay, doesn't he? At the start?
Yeah, and that was. I mean, we encouraged him to do that because his original, he kept trying to push it in there, and then when he wrote the different essay, Tonya was like, have him go back and add that in there. Have him go back and add that personal touch, and then I think that actually changed. That allowed him, and now his essay for Volume 2 is all about like his life of Superman. So he's like, oh, I'm free. Like I'm free. And that's all Alyson, right? Like Alyson gave us permission to I mean, Tonya was already including so much of herself in her essay, but like Alyson's being Alyson, who like, we're like, write an essay. And she's like, here it is 4 days later. I'm done. I'm moving on. Like she's a professional essayist, right? So it's like, this is her job, right? Is to like be like, this is her thing. But like,
and it's so clean. Like we're like, all right, well, we have 4 suggestions.
Yeah, right.
Add a comma.
Yeah,
You know?
right. Can we only have one space between these lines instead of two? But she freed us up because she is so fearless. Like one of my favorite things about Alyson Shelton is her fearlessness, and I wish
She's inspiring.
She is. I'm an envy of her ability to do what she does all the time. I say this to her. I've said it to her face. I'm saying it here. So I read something Alyson writes, and I'll be like, "That person's cool." I'm like, I know her. I can call her up if I want, and she'll answer. So that helped too, because reading Alyson's essay then allowed us to figure out what we needed to tell Heath, and then that helped, and I think that brought his essay together in a real good way.
Hers was instrumental in shifting the focus between just that straight on straight comparison to no, this essay collection is about the value of comic books. Not just as art, but just the value of them, the way they touch our lives, the way they transform us, the way they help us to connect with others. And that is high art. Things that do that are high art.
Yeah, and the therapeutic value, and of them, and the fact that Alyson's relationship with Cody is through comic. Like that was one of the she had to accept his nerd for that, and she loves him and loves his nerd, and he's a great guy. I love talking.
And then
to
she
him,
goes on to create her own comic.
Exactly, which I love.
Right, Reburn is amazing. Definitely read it. Like anybody listening, go out, buy it, read it, and then share it with others because it deserves to get way more attention than it has.
I know. It's so great, right? It's such a great story, and it is really.
Of it. When I did the Comic-Con in July. Yeah. They were selling themselves because people would see them and touch them and be like, this is a quality product. Like the pages are beautiful. They didn't even need to know the story yet. It was just holding it. Yeah. And Mike is holding them up right now. They look beautiful.
And the other thing is as for those of us who know the story of Reburn, this version of Reburn isn't what she sat down to write. It was going to focus on the different generation, and then this is the book you get. But that means there's more. There's a whole lived-in universe there, and I think that's the other thing about comic books. Stan Lee always said every comic book is somebody's first comic book, which is why he was so wordy. Which is why he was always like Wolverine, Canadian man of mystery who doesn't remember. They're like, okay, but there's a way. He's not. To say Stan Lee is wrong, but I'm not. But what we can do and what Alyson does with Reburn and what comic books do is any comic book can be your first comic, but what she does with Reburn is you understand the world building that happens in comic books and that what literature does, that art does. Like there's that layered background. What's the backstory? What's happening off page? What's happening off panel? Who's over there living in that house? Like who's looking out their window at Spider-Man swinging by? Who's like in the Reburn world, like there's just normies walking around. Like that's, and like in Black, the comic that Tonya and I did together, like there's just like folks walking around and they're on the train and they're in the background and they're looking at the protagonists in that book and the antagonist, and they're like trying to live a life. And so the world is so lived in. And again, that, like you said, Tonya, with her essay showing us that lived experience of, here's this person, Alyson Shelton, here's Natasha, here's where they're connected, even though they're fictional people, because there's this weird lived experience that they have, fiction and nonfiction, and the universe is vast. And so I think, I think that's the one thing we really hit on too. Because when I was writing mine, the Betty Page stuff, that was not part of my original draft. But as I dug into it and I realized, these guys inspired, they were inspired by Betty Page to write Poison Ivy, to look like Poison Ivy. But then when you dig into Betty Page, she was super political, even though she never talked about it. It was like all intentional subversion, and everything she did had its own purpose. And so then you're like, now when you look at the modern day version of Poison Ivy, she's not a villain, right? She's an eco warrior. She's a political activist.
Right.
So you have this, this like middle character, this move from Hawthorne to Betty Page, who was a caricature of herself, right? Like the performance was Betty Page. And so it was just like such a cool thing. It was just such a fun experience to go along for the ride and to see like, you're constantly pulling from these old inspirational materials.
Yeah, and it's also, there's a couple of things there. One thing about comics that I liked, and dear reader, eventually there'll be an essay of mine if it passed the test and it's not written like absolute dross. There'll be one of mine showing up at some point in Comics Lit, and I speak about the value of comics, obviously part of it. And one of the things is that comics bridge the gap for me between a book and, say, a movie. Because you've got for me, it's the perfect in-between. Because you've got the effort of reading, and you have to fill in the gaps between panels, you put your own voices, your own sound effects in a way. Part of yourself goes into, because it imprints on the page as you're reading it. With books, as much as we all love books, there's a lot of description, but your brain visually has to do a lot of heavy lifting. Whereas conversely with movies, you have to do no heavy lifting. You just sit there and absorb it all. And comics have got that really nice in-between, which is quite accessible for a lot of people. And for when you're trying to build certain worlds, or maybe with my case of reading a lot of Star Wars comics, expanding on some or adding flavor, adding color literally to certain things that have only been described in written prose, it's such a good go-between. And that's really, they would say with movies, show, don't tell. Well, comics are the ultimate show, don't tell, while also still telling. And it's this really beautiful sort of connection there. And I think just in nerd culture, how invaluable comics are, bridging the gap between, the easy thing to consume, but the insanely complicated thing to make, compared to a book, which in theory is easy to make, in air quotes, a lot more complicated to put together. But when reading it, you have to put in more effort. So it's such a beautiful thing there. And it also, with this essay collection, it really shows, all the different kind of voices in it and all the different styles and what's being said. It really comes together to show the ultimate collaboration. And another point I hope people don't steal these points if people write essays before mine. Another point of the book comic is comics are the ultimate collaboration, because really, obviously you've got letterers as well, which are an important factor, and editors, but really it's, for the most part, primarily the author and also the artist. Color artists as well, obviously, are a factor in that. But primarily when you have like large runs done by people, often you have two mammoths writing things together, or one writing and one kind of putting the words into a visual medium. So it's really just the ultimate collaboration. And unironically, Comics Lit is an ultimate collaboration, which is literally what comics are about. So it just works on so many different levels.
Well, bravo to you for recognizing it. I can't wait to read your essay.
If it's good, let's see. If it's as good as my show notes.
Well, you always would win the show notes award. Okay.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. We're here to help you make it better. So don't worry about sending us your draft and it not being perfect. It's not going to be perfect on nobody's was perfect on the first take.
Neither of us, we read each other's. I mean, that's the thing.
Right.
Like, I took her feedback and she took mine. And that is, I think our process is fun. So they come in, people mail them to us, and I will usually just take the first pass at them. And what we do is I save it offline. I put comments on the side. If it's like an easy change, like if it's just like this needs a comma or this is missing, this should be a colon instead of, I just make the change. Tonya will do the same. And then I send it to her. So there's comments on the side. And then at the bottom, I'll do like one comment or a note and be like, here's my overall thoughts. And then I send it to her. So she's seeing it that way. And so
I will hide his comments because I don't want to be influenced by what he has already thought. Go through and read it. Then I will unhide his comments and be like, oh yeah, for sure. Totally agree with this change right here. Yeah, good call. Nope. I kind of think that the way they have it is valid. We'll put our little notes and arguments. And then if we've never really had anything where we completely disagreed and had to butt heads over anything. It was
tough. It was tough, honestly, with Kelly's essay. It was hard to know what to take out. And there were a couple it wasn't a disagreement, but it was like, I think ultimately we decided to just move it to a different place instead of cutting it. Because it was like, Could we cut this? And then ultimately we're like, well, what if we just move this up here? And then that connects everything. So that was it. Yeah, there's never been because that's the thing, Mike, we're not asking randos from the mall. We're asking people we know and trust and who trust us.
Yes.
So that we are getting something quality.
Well, you didn't ask me. I told you. I was like, I'm not going to ask. I'm just going to do it, and I'm going to make one.
You have an honorary in. You introduced us. This wouldn't have happened without
it doesn't.
you.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean I'm a writer. I know that the term writer. If you write, you're a writer. It's more like so many of these people are.
I've read your poetry. I say you are a writer.
Well, that's very cute. Thank you. But it's one of those where I think anyone can be a writer in different ways, and I'm sure Spider Dan probably shares some of the imposter syndrome is real for so many people. I spoke to Cavan Scott, who's literally a New York Times bestselling author who writes Star Wars, for a living and loads of other crazy stuff and Doctor Who, and he has imposter syndrome. And I'm like, you're quite near the top of comic royalty, especially with something with Star Wars, and you have imposter syndrome. So anyone can have it. It's natural. And I think Spider-Dan I think vocalize it more so, whereas I stop myself normally and kind of get myself back. I'm like, no, stop. You're great. Get back in there. Of that kind of thought of, oh, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe, and I get that when I listened to Spider-Dan and banned books. I think he second guessed himself and was like, oh, I know I'm not as smart as everyone else, but here's a phenomenal point that no one thought of. And it's like, dude, right. You are as intelligent and as brilliant as everyone else, and in many ways more. It's all about I
wouldn't invite you on the show if I didn't think you were bringing value to it.
Exactly. And that's one of the things. This all, with the collaboration of it all and the network we have both, kind of fostered by sort of the Comics in Motion Network, Genuine Chit-Chat, those kind of early days podcasting, and how the vines have spread out to all the different collaborations we've all been involved with. It's really going to encourage people who maybe want to try something, want to try writing. I've been thinking since before I did podcasting, I was originally going to write a book. And that was, my dad's a published author, so he wouldn't read his books. I wouldn't recommend. They're very heavy erotic thrillers. But it's one of those things where I've always kind of wanted to write, but it's always, I think a lot of people want to be writers, but I think a lot of people are like, well, it's a book or nothing, and I don't have enough to write, 400-page prose, or I don't have a good enough idea to flush out for a huge thing, and I don't know anyone who wants a novella, and I don't know this. Whereas if you're like, hey, every now and then, because I don't want to restrict you guys to a schedule, so often we're going to try and release a volume of Comics Lit. If there are some people who we trust and have got something to say, this is an avenue for you to try. And some people, I imagine, get inspired by the thrill of themselves writing, which I love.
I would agree to that, Tonya.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing is, the more we put this out in the world, the more we talk about this volume, the more people keep coming to us with, I have an idea about this, or I've always wanted to write about this, but I didn't know what to do with it. Now I have a place to put it. Or I've been embarrassed about my love of comic books, but now you have inspired me to share that with the world. All of these different, that's why we're on volume 3 right now, when literally last month, the first edition came out. And we're already working on volume 3 because people have gotten so excited about it. We've had to start making the list to make sure that we can control how many store or how many essays are in each one.
Because you don't want an Encyclopedia Britannica sort of style.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think it would be a bad problem. We've talked about it. Like maybe after volume 3, if there is a law and we get into a rhythm, we could put out one every 6 months. We don't want to commit to that because we're busy, because I'm a novelist who's got a full-time job, and Tanya's editing a film and is an actor and is a writer and does all the, I mean, Tonya, I don't know how she sleeps. And so, we're busy, so busy. And so, but that is the dream, right? That would be a good problem to have. I mean, the fact that we already have Eric Grissom, who's the writer of the Goblin books and Gregory Suicide, he's writing the foreword for volume 2. And then talk about somebody who's very open about her imposter syndrome. Brenna Thumler is going to do Brenna Thumler, who wrote a musical adaptation of one of her own graphic novels, has imposter syndrome. Brenna frickin' Thumler, who was on Banned Books 2 years ago, who's amazing. She's going to do the foreword for volume 3. Eisner nominated Brenna Thumler. It's going to just roll on up and be like, yep, I can't wait to do it for you. So and again, these are like titans of the industry, right? Like Goblin, the first Goblin was Dark Horse's best-selling young adult graphic novel when it came out. And Eric's like, yeah, man, I'll write that forward. Because people think it's such a cool thing. They want to be. So we are making connections. And so right now, Tonya and I are in a book with Bryan Edward Hill. And Mike Burton will be in a book with Brenna Thumler and Alyson Shelton, which is amazing, right? I mean, also we know Alyson will keep showing up. She's probably already got 5 more written waiting for us to add.
Funnily enough, I've already got a second one in mind. I need to know what Spider Dance is so I don't cross paths because
he sent us a list of like 15. And he's like, which one should I write? Like, I'm not telling you which one to write.
Which one calls to you, my friend?
Yes. Yeah, we probably said the same thing to him.
Yeah, we did.
Like, this one, then that's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing is the inspiration, and it will be, you know, it's already got its own legs. Like you guys kind of went, go on then, and then it's like, oh, it's already down, it's already gotten. Oh, okay, it's like that's the beauty.
And the one thing that is good about Tonya's steady hand is that I have been involved in projects before that were a seed of an idea that was a good enough idea that it went from, hey, I'm standing up here with this really good idea to within 30 seconds, I'm like rolling down the hill like Princess Bride style. And that's not safe. So it's good that Tonya's like, don't commit to doing 2 a year right now.
The Chris and Dave of Comics Emotion.
100%. But it's good. I need that because we want it to be good too. We want the quality to be good. We want to make sure we've got cool covers. You can tell
fast is not necessarily better.
Right. And my favorite thing about the covers, you can tell Val, who made the cover, you can tell she read the book. Because she knew to pick, you know, like, that's Tonya and Eric on the cover. And she knew she wouldn't have known that if she hadn't read the essays. Right.
I mean, you can tell by what they're wearing and just their facial features that she had those particular essays in mind.
Yeah. And so that's really exciting too, that we have a good partner there. And because Tonya and I do so much of the work, and again, that's part of the collaboration, but because Tonya and I bring them a nearly finished thing, I think what Jen did the edit on this in like a week, right?
Yeah, it was very fast and she had minimal changes.
So it came together really well. It's been
Plus,
great.
we trust her. She's an excellent editor.
Yeah.
So, we weren't butting heads going, I don't want to change this. It was, all right, this thing, it's spelled like this for a reason. Or, we just had to communicate. And as long as you communicate, that's good collaboration. And we move forward from there. There were no issues in that area. And that's great to have a publisher that trusts us to bring in the right people and to provide quality work, and then to have a partner like Tony who definitely delivers.
Collaboration's all about, it's like improv. It's all like yes and. That's really, it's the positive things. It's like you can still be critical. You can be like, yeah, what you've put is great. And also you can adjust it with this rather going, no. Do you know what I mean? It's there's slight variations in how one can collaborate, but you two are both, you're positive people, but you don't pander and just allow bullshit just for to save someone's feelings. You know what I mean? You're not going to be like, oh no, don't worry, this is a great essay. It's not really not very good. You know what I mean? You'd be like, no, you need to adjust this, you need to adjust that, and you need to be respectful and know. And you guys are both very empathetic as well. So it's like you need to be able to see where they're going, so that when there's certain individuals who may need a bit of a more guiding hand than someone else, you can help them tell the story they want to tell, as opposed to changing what their story is to fit what you want it to be, if you know what I mean. And again, that's comics. How many stories have we heard about, an author going, oh yeah, I had an idea for a character to look like this, and then the artist went, yeah, but I kind of went in this direction. They're like, oh my god, that's so much better than I thought it was going to be. I think Alyson said that when they were doing Reburn, and when Elise McCall, when they were talking about that, like, they weren't clashes in air quotes, but Elise kind of did her own thing a little bit more in certain elements. And when she did, Alyson was like, that's even better than I thought it was going to be. And so that's what you need in these collaborations. And I wanted to ask, sort of linking in with that, is just because you guys mentioned future volumes, will they have sort of specific themes, more essays, the same sort of size? Like, if this is like logistics chat that's behind the scenes stuff you can't talk about.
No, we can talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think our goal is 9 to 11. And this one could have had 11. But just 2 of the collaborators were doing different things. Matt Lloyd, unfortunately, he got hit with really long COVID, and it really just, he's talked about that repeatedly. 100%. And so that was, Matt just wasn't there for us. And we had the timeline, and then Scott was finishing the Moon Knight book. So they just weren't ready. So their essays, so as soon as we were ready for volume 2, they while we were editing volume 1, they finished their essays. So the first 2 in were were Scott's and Matt's. It was just like a time thing, and it was a space thing too. So I think we've got Tony Holt's not going to participate in volume 2. Tonya and I are writing a co-essay. Unfortunately, Ada's Tank Girl essay will probably have to be pushed back too. So, but we've added Tyler. His is really interesting. Neil's coming aboard.
Is in bag?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that guy. I haven't had him on the pod, but I'm like, he's just shining light of amazingness. Whenever I see anything about him, I'm just like, I love that guy.
Yeah. So we'll probably have, I think, 10 this time. But yeah, I think that's the sweet spot. We're trying to find something that, like, we're 2,500 words is what we tell people. And then if you roll up with 1,800, that's fine. If you roll up with 3,000, that's fine. What we don't want is, 7,500 words. We want it to be you sit it in read it in one sitting, get that emotional beat from it, and then do what you did. Either go on and do your research, or, this isn't necessarily meant to be read in any, we put it in an order, but you could pick them up, read it out of order. You could read one and put it down and come back.
Like comics.
Yeah, exactly. So I do think, I don't know. I just think we thought, and I'm going to be real frank, right? It was also price-wise. If we kept it short, they would be inexpensive enough that people would be willing to say, like, I'm going to pick this up. Wasn't that also part of it, Tonya?
And then if we keep it the same length, it's going to look really good on the bookshelf beside each other. And I know that sounds like a silly thing to think of, but it does. It's going to be the same length. Right, exactly. And
some of them work, some of them don't work.
Yeah.
Some of them drive me mad. Why is this one different to all the other ones?
So for the OCD book lovers.
That's me. I've got DVDs and you're like, oh yeah, we've got the first 3 movies are this very, like the Sherlock Blu-rays. First 3 are all exactly the same, very specific font, very color. 4th one, completely different. It's like, no, what are you doing?
I like how you accuse me of being the one to think of that.
Yeah.
Maybe you spend some time with me.
And Val did say that maybe when we get to 5, we would maybe put out like a
collection,
a big old hardcover. So if somebody, because that's what you do in comics, right? When you get to a certain point of comics, you put together a collection, and then maybe we could get a new introduction, because like when you get the collected editions, like you're reading Criminal Volume 1,
definitive edition.
Right. And then there's a new essay from someone who's like, I read these essays and this made me think this. So that would be a cool, another thing to put in there. So and again, you talk about partners. The one thing that I do love about our publisher, because they do publish my fiction and they're publishing Tonya's other essay collection and soon to be fiction collection.
52 Love.
The cool thing about them, my favorite thing that they say to us is, it's your book. We just want to help you make it better. And what we've all been there. I'm just going to say it out loud, and I'm not casting aspersions at any particular publisher, but you've all read books where you're like, all of a sudden the book takes a hard right turn in the final act because some editor got handsy. And that is so disappointing. And you can tell it's a different voice, it's a different tone, it's a different everything. And you're like, what the hell was this? And that was somebody saying, oh, we need X. And that is really, they don't ever say, we need this. They say, we want you to tell your story. And, we need it to be good. We need it to be on time.
Yes.
We need it to be proofread. We need it to be these things. But what we're never going to tell you to do is what to say. And I think that's really important.
With all creatives, the biggest issue I find with movies is quite an easy one to talk about because everyone's seen movies, is like, one of the biggest issues you find with movies, giant franchises, smaller films, whatever, is like as soon as you get heavy producer intervention, when they're not worried about making something amazing, they're thinking about, is it going to make money? Is it going to tick this box? The amount of films you watch, like there's one which is Ryan Reynolds and Jeff Bridges called the RIPD, Rest in Peace Department. Okay. My brother really likes that film. I didn't mind it. I didn't hate it like everyone else, but I watched that and I was like, there is so much here that could be phenomenal. And anytime Jeff Bridges gets asked about it, he was like, it was a great idea. We signed on with a great script. And then the producers got their hand on it, ripped it to shreds, put it back together, and it's crap. And I was like, and that's just such a perfect encapsulation of when collaboration goes one-sided, it no longer becomes collaboration. It becomes control. No. And that's not the same thing.
Yeah, I had a production meeting yesterday for a film that I am going to be a producer on in next March. And we have a certain amount of money available for this. And I asked, well, why are we not taking this pot and bringing it to other investors? And the biggest reason is they want creative control. Like with this, we can control the final product. But when we start bringing other investors on board, there's always the risk that they're going to come with stipulations. You need to put my niece in this key role. You need to.
That's never happened, has it? No one ever
has no acting classes, or even aspirations. I just want her to be a star, just that kind of thing. Or you have to make my nephew the cameraman.
Has he used a camera phone? Oh no.
Yeah, just all of these things. And that's a valid fear. So we have to take that into consideration. Do we make a lower budget film that we control the final product, or do we potentially make a more extravagant film but have to deal with those, underhanded, sideways, but you have to use this person?
Because I do think that matters too with the money. And the other cool thing too is that so all of us who participate, we get an equal percentage of the sales. So
I would have done it for free. You didn't have to tell me that.
Well, but that's the deal. That's the way we set it up. And so the publisher gets their cut, and then the rest of us divide the rest equally. And the reason for that is we weren't going to do word count because, again, we weren't going to be like, oh, well, your essay is long or whatever. This isn't Dickens, right? Part of the reason why Dickens wrote so much is because he got paid by the word count. It's, they were like, we're filling your magazine if you can give us a couple hundred extra words. And he had 12,000 kids he had mouths to feed. So he just kept writing stuff. And I'm not here to crap on Dickens. That was a model back then. We don't want that model. We want it to be what we want it to be. And I think
I'm surprised you mentioned that, not War and Peace.
Hey, I loved that. We still have to talk about that one day.
I know we still have to discuss that, but there is definitely, you have said this 6 times already, sir.
I know. And also the takeaway of War and Peace, I don't know if you guys, spoiler alert, not a big fan of Napoleon.
Yeah.
The villain of the piece is definitely Napoleon. There's 150 pages of them just dunking on Napoleon. It's over and over. What is,
He's short. He's stupid.
Oh, it's so funny.
He's not a good leader.
Can't find his way out of his own tent. So we wanted to make sure, but even with that, whatever the point is that people wanted to make, we didn't want to get in their way. At no point in time did we step in and say, yours is longer, so it's worth more. Yours is shorter, so it's worth less. Your idea is this. Bring what you want to bring to the table. And what I think, when you read them, Eric's in particular, Eric Lee, you learn so much. I don't think he writes in first person in that at all, but you learn everything you need to know about Eric Lee when you read his Superman Moses essay. I love that essay so much. And you learn everything about him. And his new essay is about the Hulk. And it's the same thing. You're like, hot damn, this guy who's a psychologist by trade is bearing it all to us. And it's so good. And I think that's what's really cool too. We didn't know what to expect. And from any of them, and you hear their voices, whether you've ever, and we know them all. So of course we know what they sound like, but everybody here knows Seth. You read Seth's essay and it's like you're talking to Seth. You want to to talk to Seth.
I didn't know Seth when we started this.
Right. You didn't.
And his comparison, I was like, I don't know. Okay, I'm willing to listen. Yeah. And I read it. I was like, okay, I am a believer. I see it. I see these comparisons. So you have to be open to learning new things, even from the editor standpoint.
Yeah. And we trust them to tell us the story that they want to tell. And you didn't know Kelly until this either, Kel Gaines.
No.
And
now I'm a fan.
I'm a huge fan.
After reading her work, I'm a fan. And that was before I even got to know that she's just an amazing person in general. But she's a brilliant writer.
She really is. And her new essay is going to be about folklore and mythology. And it's the love of that she has. She's writing about Harrow. She's writing about Harrow County, Cullen Bunn's Harrow County. It's going to be epic. And she's so great. And it's just the thing about the essay, and I don't know, Mike, and how you feel about this, but the essay, and of course, Alyson Shelton, professional essayist, but the essay is such an amazing form. It gets the word is used in school, write an essay or whatever. But these essays are so personal. They're so honest. And I feel like the 9 of us really came together to tell a lot about ourselves. The fact that I wrote about a Batman character, that I wrote about Hawthorne, that I wrote about, of course, I made sure I mentioned Robin in there at least once. You learn all about me by reading this essay. And I think an essay is such a cool form. And so, like you're saying, you're sitting down and you felt inspired. Neil told us after we talked to him, he wrote like 850 words the next day of his first draft.
I'm just waiting for you guys to stop.
Time.
I'm waiting for you guys to stop
time.
so I can get back to the essay. I'm thinking Megan's quite tired tonight, so she can go to bed early, so I could just sit up and finish my essay. That's literally what I've been thinking about.
It's such an underrated art form.
I agree, and I was going to say, like, what I quite like about the podcasting sphere and a lot of you lot is, I've always said that I'm like not quite a dabbler, because that makes it sound like I drop things, but like I have an approximate knowledge of most things. Like I can talk about almost anything because I've vaguely been involved with so many different things. And when Scott was releasing Judging Dredd, which I think you contributed to as well, didn't you, Tony?
I did. Yep.
So when he released that, and I was like, not that interested because I don't have that connection to Judge Dredd. I've since been given a duffel bag by someone at work because I mentioned Judge Dredd and stuff, and he found a collection of 2000 AD comics that his son had, and it's a duffel bag full. I haven't gone through them yet, like Golden Age size as well. So I bought specifically Golden Age comic cover things, I can't remember what they're called, sleeves, and I'm going to go through them one day, but like when he did Judging Dredd, I was like, that's a cool idea. The only thing, I haven't even seen the Sylvester Stallone Dredd. I've just seen the Carl Urban Dredd and then know him peripherally because my brothers both really love Dredd. And so when he wrote that, I was like, an essay collection about Dredd, I was like, no judgment, I'm not fussed. And then when he was doing the Moon Knight one, I was like, oh, Moon Knight's a character, because obviously Scott and I spoke about Moon Knight a bit, and I was like, he's a character I've wanted an excuse to do a deep dive on. So I did, and obviously I spent like 6 months going through all the major Moon Knight stuff, and then I read Waxing and Waning. And so when I read that, I was like, oh, this isn't something I necessarily expected, because I think, again, because of education in a lot of ways, not to reduce the term, but trauma from education, essentially. For years, I thought I didn't like science because science was so crappy at my school. And so I was like, I'm not really into science. Yeah, space. No, it was just a thing when I was a kid. And then I went into college and I started being able to research my own things. I was like, science is actually really cool, actually. Do you guys know science? Have you guys heard about science? So when Waxing and Waning, I read that, I was like, oh wow, this is really amazing. There's so many things about Moon Knight. It inspired me, made me read more Moon Knight and go into that. But I had that baggage from school. When I hear the word essay, I'm like, no, I don't like it. No, I have to write about something I don't give a crap about, but I have to write a really specific amount about something, and then you're going to judge me not on what I'm trying to say, but on my literary skill by the educational board's standard, and also the biases of the teacher. So for me, I was one of those people, and I want to say to people listening, essays can be fun. Essays really are, excluding education and the worst side of education. There is so much you can say. When you say to someone short stories, very few people go, short stories. Some people might go, I haven't read that many, which I hadn't until Star Wars started releasing them, and then I obsessively read loads of them. But I think that with essays, it's really just like, hey, it's a short story, except pretty much non-fiction. It's like a non-fiction short story. Like, why would you not be interested by that? And so I am now one of the flag bearers of essays, because I'm like, oh, essay collections now. I was thinking the other day, I was like, maybe I'll buy it, because I saw one or two like Star Wars essay collections. I'm like, no, I can't read any of that, so I'm finished with my essay, because I'll be in, it will inspire me in the wrong ways, and I don't want to be influenced. I want my own voice. So I genuinely, when you say that, Tony, I literally lived that until very recently. So this is one of the reasons I really wanted to like chat with you guys. I want to contribute and do what I can, because I'm like, let's get rid of the stigma of essays being something that was basically really long drawn out homework, because that's still a feeling, I think, for a lot of people.
I did originally sit down to make mine way more academic sounding. Like, it was not supposed to be a personal essay. Number one, I was going to write about the Hulk, but when I sat down, that's just not what was coming to me. And I had my first version of this was a lot more distant, and I accidentally slipped something about myself in there. I actually, the line in there about the word where I used the word meow, that was in there. And when I had someone read it, they're like, this is the most interesting part of this, and you need to make the rest of this more like this. Like, put more of you in this, because that's the thing that's grabbing me. It's not tell me the history and, give me point for point analysis. That's cool, but I would rather hear about it from your perspective, from your lens, rather than you just telling me this is this and this is that.
Yeah, it's not research. It's not like a research paper. You know, I'm not
Right.
picking up Comics Lit so I can find out specifically what year did Superman first debut? Which comic did? Like, if I learn that
Right.
naturally through the journey I'm being told, but it's about perspective and making you want. This is the thing I'm trying to say about Comics Lit is I love it because it's making me want to do my own research, to want to read Black Widow, to want to read Catwoman, you know, to want to think about like the concepts of wearing a mask, or I still haven't read Saga. Please don't get mad. I know it's on my list. Like all these things, I'm like, it's just the content in this one volume is enough to satiate nerdy reading for really a year easy. And there's so much more to it. That's just on the surface level of what characters were discussed.
Yeah, because we let everybody. There was no handle, right? So we've got major characters, you know, from the big two. We've got obviously some image stuff in there, and then we, you know, and we're going to branch out as we move on. You know, in volume 2, we've got some more image stuff. We're going to have some Dark Horse stuff. We're going to have, but I think, you know, the big two will stay. They're the big two, right, for a reason. They're of course are going to stay front and center as we move forward with the volumes. But I also feel like this need to write about. You know, and we'll see. I mean, I already know what my topic for essay 3 is going to be. Tonya and I did our essay for volume 2 together, which is going to be really cool. Really excited on that. I've got to work on the draft of that. That's over break because I'm going to be staying in a place where there's no internet for a week. So I definitely will have time to just sit and work on
writer's
things.
cabin.
Yeah, sort of.
In the woods.
It is a cabin in the woods. I'm hopeful it doesn't turn into Drew Goddard's cabin in the woods, but you know but unless Sigourney Weaver's there, then that's totally fine.
That would make everything okay.
Or make everything fine. But yeah, so it is such a you know, it's such a beautiful medium that we can all like just live in and grow within ourselves. And again, like you said, change the paradigm of what an essay means, change the paradigm of what comic books are. And again, and I love that you come back to, because my favorite thing, the thing that really I didn't know they were going to do is the Val picked those images for the beginning of each essay. We didn't know they were going to do.
I was going to ask about that off air because I was like, didn't want to ask about the images just in case there's a copyright thing or whatever. I was like, I like these, but there was the consistency between them. They felt like the authors almost chose them, but I was like, this one looks like a photo. Is that a photo of a person they know? So please tell us more about that a little bit.
We did not pick them. So the part of the contract with them is that they do get final say on like cover and images, and we can reject them if we want, but ultimately they get final say. We did go back and forth on a few of the images where we were looking for some changes, but like the ones they picked, they rolled up. We did not know those were going to be there. That is what the typesetter and the book designer did. Val did it all, right? Val did the book design and the typeset for this one, right, Tonya?
I think so.
Yeah. So
if she had help, we didn't hear about it.
Yeah. So that was a surprise to us. It's just like when I got Welcome to Mansfield back, and when you open it up and there's the stuff all around the front page, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that was going to be there. I'm glad you liked the pictures. I think it's a cool thing. And again, it's another, you know, the old timey graphic novel, like the original novels, like again, to go back to Dickens and Austen and the Bronte sisters, they would have like pictures in there. You know, the Harry Potter books have the pictures and then there's the words, right? So there's like a little framing thing. But yeah, it's up to you, sister, to say what you want to say about the pictures. I will leave this to you because we definitely had some back and forth with Mimi.
We did have some back and forth. We didn't love all of them, but ultimately they worked with us. They worked with us, and we were able to choose the best from what was available. But there was at least one essay where we went through maybe 5 different pictures, which means that they were willing to listen when we said, yeah, we don't love this.
I imagine part of it is like a legal thing as well. Like, you
that's
know,
exactly
images
right.
is such like stock images. I have to be really careful when I'm doing stuff because I'm like, you know, Dave and I have spoken about with podcasty stuff, like on YouTube, certain things. Like, I don't use official Star Wars music for intros for some of my Star Wars pods because then they get picked up by YouTube, blah. And I'm like, I can't be bothered with that for an intro being nicer. So I've always, whenever there's things like that, even when I create artwork for people, I make sure I use fonts that are commercially free and I've got the license somewhere to say, you can use this, and if you make money off it, don't worry about it. Rather than potentially going down a road thinking this is ace, and then have some trollop come by and go, hey, this one image you use that has no real bearing on anything, I want some of that money. And it's like, so I sympathize with them from working in graphic design for many years and having to create commercial products for people. Sometimes you have to say, look, I know this image is perfect for you, but it's a copyrighted image. We have to pay loads of money to this person to have that picture on this thing. So I understand why there was probably...
That's exactly the situation is, what are we going to do? Have this big copyright price attached to every one of these essays? That's just not financially feasible.
Right. Because again, we didn't do that. I mean, yes, we've all got, we all have earned a few dollars, I think he said the very first one that came out, he was like, hey, I got 75 cents the other day. Because it just happened to come out like very early in the pre-order. So we had sold like 2 copies or whatever. But and that's the other thing too, is this is a passion project. Obviously we would love to be able to say we are making money as writers, but that, that time has passed unless you are like working in a writer's room, like on a sitcom, or you're a professional writer, like in a movie or whatever.
Even they don't get paid enough. They do not get paid
exactly.
enough.
Well, Mike Chen has a day job. Mike Chen, the one who's written What If, Venom, Moon Knight, okay, who wrote Star Wars Brotherhood, who's written for Star Trek and that sort of stuff. He has a day job. He literally was talking to me. He's like, when I did the podcast with him, he's like, I'm basically on a lunch break to do promo for a Marvel book published by Penguin Random House. Yeah. And his last book was a Star Wars book, and he still has a day job. And it's like...
Well, part of that is too, the other part of it is too, that is all facts. Part of it too is we are working with an independent publisher through an independent, so our cut is bigger. Like if we became a bestseller, like if my novels broke and I started like selling millions of copies, I would make so much money. Whereas if I were with Penguin Random House, I would make some.
Because it's
90-10. They're 90-10.
Yeah.
Penguin Random House they also give you, we didn't get in advance.
Yeah.
Right. They're like, we're putting this out, and then we split the back end. And so there's Erica puts a lot of investment.
There are pros and cons to both methods. And, you can get in advance, you get an opportunity to be automatically in more places.
Yeah.
Right.
Or you don't get the advance, but you get a larger cut once royalties come in, and you get a lot more creative control.
100%.
And I think as artists, I think that's what we want, and to me, that's the whole point of this series, is we're artists talking about art. We're people who love a medium, who love working together, who are excited to see the people calling us up and sending us messages. Ooh, can I participate? Volume 3. Like when Ada was like, oh man, I don't think I'm going to be able to participate. Volume 3. Like genuinely, like she let us down. It's somewhere that we're like, take care of yourself. You're our friend.
Right. We want you here for the long run, not for one essay collection.
Right. And so it's like, it's just one of those things though. So it's both. It's like, because also she really wants to write that Tinkerbell essay, and we want Ada's Tinkerbell essay, but we'll get it when we get it. And whenever it's ready, she's back in. And so it's just such a cool experience. And it's one of those situations where I'm thrilled that this book exists. I'm so proud. He's been my friend since I was 16 years old. And so it's like I look at the names in that book and I'm like, I'm friends with all of these people. This is a real situation where I live in now, where all these people are connected. People who didn't know each other now do. I heard Tony Holt on Seth's podcast the other day. I heard Al, it's like so cool. It's like they know each other now because of this. And Tonya and I know each other because of you, Mike. So thank you for that, my friend.
That's it. If my only role in life was just connecting people, then from now I'd be like, I've done a pretty good job so far.
Really have.
Of it. That's not my only role, and that wasn't necessarily my intention, but it's just collaboration as I've gotten older and stuff. And it's just, when I started podcasting, I was like, I'll do podcasting because it's a creative outlet, and all my other creative outlets were too heavily reliant on other people, and I want it for me. And what I didn't realize is that with doing it is the friendships and the connections I would make. I literally, when Megan and I, my now wife, went to America, everyone who went to my wedding party, who was there at the ceremony, were people I knew via podcasting. Like that, none of my friends and family from the UK were there. They were my podcast friends. And then when we traveled around UK and stayed with people and stuff, I got to meet Alyson, I got to meet Tony. Like, And it's so weird. I'm like, I went to a different country and had a month-long trip, and the things I was most excited for, apart from building a lightsaber and Yosemite, was seeing people, but I was so buzzed to be able to be like, these people are so important to me. And when I had my UK wedding, there was a whole table just of podcasting friends, just of comics and motion people. And it's so thrilling to be able to, again, collaborate. Like that's the word of the day, kids, is just collaboration is just so underrated. And when I hear about creators who are too controlling on some of their stuff, I'm like, you do you make your own work. If you want it to be a single vision, that's on you. But like for me, I couldn't imagine doing anything creative. Like the name of my podcast, I didn't even come up with. I was spitballing it with some of my mates, and I was like, I've got an idea in my head. The word genuine in like big cheesy kind of golden or silver letters, but I needed something that's not conversations or thing. And my mate Kieran just went, "What about Chit-Chat?" And I was like, oh fuck, why did I not think of that? And so, he's never even been in the podcast. Like he's not into being interviewed or anything like that. But I'm just like, every time I see the name, I'm like, my name of my podcast, which I always get complimented on for being original, was not my idea. It was a spitball I started, but I didn't come up with that because collaboration. And it's just, the whole book is so inspiring and all the essays are so valuable. And I feel like, as you kind of said with Kelly Gaines, is like, I feel like all of these could really be expanded almost into their own books because there's so much meat there. But what's brilliant is these people are so creative, and a lot of them have presence online in podcasts or in books and stuff. It's amazing. I wanted more. My only disappointment was when I was trying to find Tony Holt online. He doesn't fucking exist, and he literally doesn't pop up anywhere apart from on Tonya's Banned Books thing. And I think he knows Ada outside of that realm as well. But like, I don't know. I can't find him.
They live in the same city and they're very close.
Yeah, which is cool. It's all these little connections you wouldn't necessarily know about. And it's just, I just love it. So, as we wrap up, because, I would talk for hours more, but we've got
Unfortunately, I have work.
You both have got stuff to do. I'm in the evening. I could just keep talking forever. But final sort of words from the two of you. I've gushed a lot about this just because I want to show how passionate I am and how much I really, I was excited for you guys, but then when I really started reading it, I was like, this blew my expectations, even more so than I had. So the last sort of final comments from the two of you, we'll go to Tony first with final comments and then also plugs. And then if you need to dip out, we can finish off with Tonya.
Yeah, I'm just really thrilled that this happened. I am. And again, thank you, Mike, for having Tonya on. Thanks, Bruce, for setting that up, because I heard Tonya and was like, I know her. And I just feel, I feel that real connection. We call each other Wonder Twin, and which is fun. And so I just appreciate you, Mike. Appreciate you, Tonya. This is just like such a labor of love for me. And to see the names of the people in that book, I'm like, this year I had a big year, right? I had Comics Lit come out. I had Dashwood Girl come out. And then just last week, I had Anachronistic Comics come out, which again is another collaboration with some of the nerds from here. But Heath and Jack is in that too. And it's just super cool to just know that art lives and art matters and art brings people together. And I firmly believe, and I'll say it over and over, art saves people. Art is important. There's food, clothing, shelter, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But then there's art. And I know you always say it's love next, but to me, art is love. It's a way that we show each other that we care about each other is through art. So thank you all. So
it's the space between. Art is all that context.
Yeah. So if you want to follow, the best way to find me is arfarina.com.
And subscribe to his newsletter, and also pick up his books. And also, if you're already on this feed, listen to all the other episodes of Done with Tony, because we've done a lot of pods, and everything will be in the show notes, and everything Tony said, Anachronistic Comics, and all that kind of tomfoolery as well. Tonya, Ms. Tonya Todd.
And as Mike said, all of that is going to be in the show notes, because he is the gold standard for show notes, 100%. When I first started doing podcasts, I went to his. It was like, let me just copy this template right here. And it's still not going to be as good because I don't have the dedication to fill in quite so many things. But man, yours blow me away. And I always send people to look at your work when they're starting their own shows.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, because I put a lot of work in. And one thing is my bugbear is when people are like, oh yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll check out the show notes. And you go in the show notes and it's just, we talk about this. And I'm like, I wanted to find the thing. And then you're trying to Google it. You're like, it's nowhere. Sorry,
It's
Tonya.
nowhere. Yeah. It's tough. So I appreciate that you put the effort in, because it is effort. It does take time. And most people are not willing to put in quite as much time or effort. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for introducing us. When Tony reached out to me to do his show, I was like, oh, good. Another strange man is trying to talk to me in the DMs, you know? But I saw that you followed him. And so I checked with you and you're like, I love Tony. I absolutely love him. He's one of the best people I've ever met. And I haven't even met him in person, but he's still that great.
That was
so that was the recommendation that I needed, you know? So thank you for introducing me to Tony. Tony, thank you for trusting me to work with you on this. It's the first time I've had my name on the cover of a book. I've been in many collections, but this is the first time my name was on the cover. And so it's because of you that I have that milestone. And, you know, our whole thing is about art and literature connecting us. None of us lives in the same place. And yet, look how much love we have for each other. We know that we would go into battle for each other because we share. It started with just the shared love of nerd things. Mike was interviewing me about my stuff and we ended up like, forget about me. Let's talk about Star Wars and Marvel and DC and all of these cool things. And we're still going.
We are forever and ever, 7 years strong of just professional talking, and it's going to keep on going. Well, Tonya, your plugs then. I mean, you've got a movie that you're doing. You've, as in you're helming, Morning Sacrifice. You've also got all kinds of other stuff. So this will be coming out not this Sunday, the following Sunday. So quite recent. So sort of anything you want to plug, and obviously it'll be in the show notes.
Well, there's definitely banned books because I have worked with both of these gentlemen on banned books, either creating my amazing logo and doing all the graphics for it, which is Mike, but he also made his debut on the series this year. We talked about Are You There, God? It's Me, or Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, was the first one for the season, and it was just an incredible conversation. Tony was supposed to be on one this year. He did the last 2 seasons, but I would say it was okay that he wasn't there because it allowed for someone, it made room for someone else. And it was her first time doing a podcast. And she was brilliant.
Was that Fly?
Yes.
And there's no way you would know that, right? That was
right.
Great. Yeah.
I only know because I'm really perceptive. So I don't know behind the scenes stuff. I literally listened to that podcast yesterday.
And she learned that I needed a replacement 2 days before that show. And she's like, well, let me reread this monster-sized book while she was at the Toronto Film Festival. And she managed to do it. And she showed up and she was brilliant. She was absolutely brilliant. You wouldn't have known it was her first time, except that she said it. So I am grateful to have those collaborations. There's a reason Tony Holt was on that show. I already knew Invisible Man, but after reading his essay, I too was inspired to dig deeper, to look more into it. We're at different phases in our lives when we have certain materials in front of us. And when I read his essay, I was definitely in a different place from the first time that I experienced Invisible Man. And so it was, let's talk about this. Let's give more voice to this particular thing. And he was amazing. He was so prepared on that show. I really enjoyed talking to him about it. I'm sad he won't be in the next one, but, when he's inspired to write his next essay, we have a home for it because he has wonderful things to say. So yes, please check out Banned Books Conversations that comes out both on Femon Podcast and Comics in Motion, or you could watch the YouTube version on my channel, which is Ms. Tonya Todd. I have an in-person book event that I'm hosting on December 1st, and both Tony Holt and Ada McCartney are supposed to be at that, sharing Comics Lit, in addition to Amanda Skenendor, whom you met, Mike, when we did our podcast together. And then Mia Heitzelman is going to be doing a book there as well. That's in Las Vegas, so you actually have to be in person for that one.
I won't be able to make it, I'm afraid.
once per year, right? And then, yes, I am still working on post for Morning Sacrifice. It's getting closer every time, but with good art, it takes time. So when it's ready, I imagine there's.
I don't know if you guys know this, but I pre-ordered this amazing essay collection called 52 Love that comes out on, I believe, Valentine's Day. So maybe everybody should pre-order that book.
Maybe
And
there'll
I'm
a link
going to
in the
be
show
having an
notes.
event in London because I will be in London on Valentine's Day. So I'm going to be doing something there. My first
With
book
Mike,
launch
maybe.
will be there. Yeah.
Ooh,
And
maybe,
Mike, you're invited.
maybe. I'll see. Depends who you're staying with when you go over there. I guess depends if they're dodgy or not. Depends if they have a dog. We'll see.
They better have a beautiful Cocker Spaniel.
Yeah. I hope they do. But just thank you both so much for coming on the show. It's always a delight chatting with you guys. We could just talk for hours, but we don't have the time. But friends who are listening, just check out the show notes. There's gonna be all kinds of stuff you can sink your teeth into. And really, this is so important: is that support independent creators. Okay, the money, £10 to the big four doesn't really do anything. Let's be honest. £10 to an independent comic book writer or bookseller or something really makes a difference, and so does reviews. Okay, review. Go on Goodreads. If you buy it on Amazon, do that. You can review on Goodreads after you've bought it somewhere else. You can put 2 reviews up. Try and review, share. If you don't have the money, just share it. Tell people about it. Christmas is coming up. Buy people that you care about, whether or not, if they just like books, if they just like comics, if they're just kind of a nerd in the best way. Comics lit. Just buy books and independent stuff for yourself. Give it to friends. Try and ask libraries for it. Things like that.
That's it. Request it at your library. That's a sale,
you can
and
do.
that gets it in everybody's hands. Libraries
Exactly.
is the answer.
Spread the word. Comics lit. Comics literature and also the essay collection Comics Lit. Get it out there. Friends, thank you so much for tuning in as always. Subscribe, do that amazing stuff. And obviously follow Tony and Tonya, subscribe to their newsletters, go to their websites, and please support independent creators. And we can do it, friends. Thank you so much for coming on.